Most people have no idea that some of the most powerful healing meals ever eaten were not invented by a modern nutritionist or discovered in a lab. They were written down thousands of years ago. The Bible does not just tell people how to live. In many ways, it also points to what they ate, how they combined foods, and how those meals helped keep entire communities strong, resilient, and able to endure hard conditions that would overwhelm most modern diets. Today, we are looking at 10 of those meals, and as this list goes on, the patterns become hard to ignore. By the time we reach the end, you start to realize these foods were not random. They were practical, repeatable, and deeply rooted in observation across generations. Let's begin with number 10, the cucumber mint yogurt bowl, a cooling meal that helped restore the body from the inside out. In the book of Numbers, when the Israelites are wandering in the wilderness, they remember the foods they once had in Egypt, and among them are cucumbers, leeks, and garlic. That detail matters because these were not luxury foods. They were everyday staples. And in a hot, dry climate, everyday staples had to do more than taste good. They had to help people survive. Cucumbers are mostly water, which made them incredibly useful in places where heat exhaustion was common, and clean water was not always easy to come by. But hydration was only part of the story. Cucumbers also contain compounds that support the body in subtle but important ways, including nutrients that help with connective tissue, skin, bones, and blood health. Now combine those cucumbers with fermented goat's milk yogurt, and the entire meal becomes something else. Goat's milk has a protein structure that many people find easier to digest than conventional cow's milk. And once it is fermented into yogurt, it becomes a living food. That means beneficial bacteria, the kind that support the digestive tract and help regulate immune responses, are now part of the meal. Add fresh mint, and you get another layer. Mint has been used for centuries to calm the stomach, reduce bloating, and help the digestive system relax. So what looks like a simple bowl of sliced cucumbers, yogurt, and herbs is actually doing several things at once. It hydrates the body, cools the system, supports digestion, and helps restore the gut. People in the ancient world did not keep eating it every day by accident. They kept returning to it because they knew how it made them feel. At number 9, garlic and herb lentil soup may be one of the closest things to an immune support system in a bowl. If someone in the biblical world had tried to build the most effective everyday meal for strength and resilience, using only the foods around them, it would likely have looked a lot like this. Lentils are already impressive on their own. They provide plant protein, slow and steady energy, fiber, and a wide range of minerals, all while feeding the gut bacteria that play a major role in immune health. But the meal becomes much more powerful once garlic is added the way it actually would have been used in the ancient world. Not as a tiny accent, but generously. When garlic is crushed or chopped, it produces allicin, a compound that has been widely studied for its activity against bacteria, viruses, fungi, and parasites. Regular garlic consumption has also been associated with better cardiovascular health, lower blood pressure, and protection against certain forms of stress on the body, including the liver. Ancient cultures did not know the word allicin, but they clearly noticed results. Garlic appears again and again in old medical traditions because people kept seeing what happened when it was used consistently. Then you add cumin, which helps regulate blood sugar and supports digestion, coriander, which is known for calming the digestive tract, and olive oil, which helps the body absorb fat-soluble nutrients more effectively. Suddenly, this is not just soup. It becomes a kind of daily maintenance meal, one that supports the gut, strengthens the immune system, and gives the body the steady resources it needs to function well. It does not need a modern rebrand. It simply needs to be back in the kitchen. Number 8 is the pomegranate and barley grain bowl. And this one is especially striking because pomegranates were not only eaten in the ancient world, they were honored. They appeared in sacred architecture, on priestly garments, and in some of the most symbolically loaded spaces in biblical history. That alone tells you something. People clearly viewed this fruit as important, and modern research has only made that more interesting. Pomegranates contain rare compounds that break down in the digestive system into substances linked with anti-inflammatory effects and possible protective benefits at the cellular level. Studies have also associated pomegranate consumption with improved arterial health, reduced blood pressure, and better overall cardiovascular function. In terms of antioxidant density, it consistently ranks near the top, but the fruit becomes even more useful when it is paired with barley. Barley is one of the oldest grains in the biblical world, and it brings beta-glucan fiber, which has been studied for its ability to help lower cholesterol and support blood sugar control. So when you build a bowl with whole barley as the base, then layer in pomegranate seeds, fresh herbs, and real olive oil, you are not just making lunch. You are combining grain-based support for the gut and heart with one of the most antioxidant-rich fruits available. Add walnuts for omega-3s, or a little feta for protein and calcium, and the meal deepens even further. The remarkable part is that ancient people had no biochemical language for any of this. They did not describe antioxidants or inflammation pathways. They simply watched what happened over time and kept building important foods into daily life and sacred memory. Sometimes repeated observation across generations notices something long before science finds the vocabulary for it. Number 7 is dates stuffed with nuts. A food that may look simple, but functioned like a portable energy system in the biblical world. The date palm appears constantly across ancient literature, not because it was poetic decoration, but because it was practical. In desert environments, dates were one of the most reliable foods a traveler, soldier, pilgrim, or laborer could carry. They offered quick energy through natural sugars, but unlike refined sugar, they also brought fiber, potassium, magnesium, copper, manganese, and B vitamins. That means they could provide immediate fuel without being empty calories. Over time, they also became associated with support for strength, endurance, and even childbirth, with modern studies later noting benefits in late pregnancy and mineral support. Now fill those dates with almonds, walnuts, or pistachios, and the effect changes. The fats and protein in the nuts slow the absorption of the date's natural sugars, giving the body a steadier release of energy instead of a fast spike and crash. Almonds contribute vitamin E and magnesium. Walnuts bring omega-3 fatty acids. Pistachios support eye health and even help nourish beneficial gut bacteria. Together, the combination becomes more than a snack. It becomes sustained fuel. That is why foods like this persisted for so long in harsh regions where portability, shelf life, and nutritional value mattered. People did not need to run controlled trials to know it worked. They just knew that when they carried dates and nuts, they lasted longer, recovered better, and kept moving. That is what makes these meals so fascinating. They are not random ingredients pulled out of old texts to sound mystical or impressive. They are patterns of wisdom preserved through repetition. Foods that cooled the body, rebuilt the gut, supported immunity, steadied energy, and protected the heart kept showing up again and again because they proved themselves over generations. And we are only getting started. The deeper we go into this list, the more obvious it becomes that the ancient world understood something many people have forgotten when food is chosen well and eaten consistently. It does far more than fill you up. Number 6 is the grape and goat cheese plate with herbs. And this is where the list starts to feel almost surprisingly modern. The vine is one of the most loaded images in all of Scripture. Noah plants a vineyard after the flood. Grapes appear at Passover, in the Song of Solomon, and across some of the most meaningful moments in both the Old and New Testaments. That repeated presence was not incidental. Something about this fruit kept drawing attention, and the more we look at it, the more understandable that becomes. Fresh grapes are packed with natural compounds that help protect cells, support repair processes, and promote cardiovascular health. Much of that value is concentrated in the skin and seeds, which is why eating them whole matters. Along with that, grapes also bring fiber, potassium, and several key vitamins in a form that is easy to work into an everyday meal. But then, the ancient world did something especially interesting with them. Grapes were often paired with goat cheese, a concentrated fermented food made from goat's milk, and then served alongside fresh herbs and olives. Once you put those pieces together, what looks like a simple snack turns into something far more layered. The beneficial compounds in grapes combined with the living bacteria found in fermented cheese create a pairing that researchers today are still trying to understand more fully, especially in relation to gut health and immune function. In other words, these two foods appear to work better together than they do apart. The herbs add another level, bringing antibacterial and digestive support, while olives contribute their own anti-inflammatory compounds and healthy fats. What is so striking here is how effortless it all seems. There is nothing complicated about a plate of grapes, goat cheese, olives, and herbs. Yet beneath that simplicity is a surprisingly complete combination. One that supports the gut, the immune system, and the body's ability to manage stress and inflammation. The people who kept eating this did not need a scientific explanation. They experienced the outcome, and that was enough to preserve the pattern. Number 5 is roasted lamb with dates and herbs. A meal that in the ancient world did not merely celebrate abundance, but often helped restore strength. Lamb carries enormous symbolic weight in Scripture, from Passover to Abraham to the imagery that runs all the way into the New Testament. But beyond symbolism, lamb was nutritionally valuable in a way that made it especially important for people living physically demanding lives. Slow-roasted lamb is rich in B vitamins, especially B12 and B6, both of which are essential for energy production, nervous system function, and the body's ability to process food efficiently. It is also one of the best dietary sources of highly usable zinc, which supports immune strength and healing. And the iron it contains is the kind the human body absorbs far more easily than iron from plant foods. For someone recovering from illness, depleted from long labor, or simply worn down over time, lamb could help restore what had been lost. It was dense nourishment, the kind that actually rebuilt the body instead of just silencing hunger for a few hours. Then come the dates, and they matter more than people realize. They provide quick, natural energy, fiber, and fruit acids that appear to enhance iron absorption, making the pairing even more effective than either ingredient alone. Add rosemary, thyme, or hyssop, and the herbs do more than perfume the meat. They bring volatile compounds that help with digestion and offer antimicrobial support as well. So this was not random seasoning. It was part of a deeper instinct about how to make rich food more effective and easier on the body. Meals like this were not just feast foods. They were recovery foods, strengthening foods, foods that restored people after life had taken too much out of them. Number 4 is figs and almonds. One of the most fascinating combinations in the entire list because it sits right at the edge of food and medicine. In Scripture, when King Hezekiah is suffering from a severe infection, Isaiah calls for a poultice of figs to be applied, and the king recovers. That detail is easy to read past, but it becomes much more interesting once you realize modern research has found that figs contain compounds and enzymes linked to tissue breakdown, wound healing, and antimicrobial activity. In other words, the ancient prescription turns out to have real biochemical credibility. But even apart from direct application, figs were already one of the most functional foods available. They are dense in minerals, rich in fiber, and loaded with nutrients that support digestion, bones, nerves, and general metabolic health. In a world without supplements, they came surprisingly close to acting like one. Now pair those figs with almonds, and the nutritional depth increases fast. Almonds deliver vitamin E in a highly useful form, along with magnesium, healthy fats, protein, and fiber. Studies have repeatedly connected regular almond consumption with better cholesterol levels, more stable blood sugar, and improved gut health. So when the ancient world combined figs and almonds, whether in cakes, ground pastes, or simple platters, they were creating something far more complete than a sweet treat. They were combining mineral-rich fruit with nutrient-dense nuts in a way that supported energy, digestion, tissue repair, and long-term resilience. The symbolism around almonds in Scripture only makes this more striking. Almond blossoms appear in the menorah. Aaron's rod buds with almonds as a sign of life and authority. Sacred meaning gathered around this food because people sensed that it represented vitality. Figs and almonds together are simple, ancient, and astonishingly effective. A reminder that some of the strongest food pairings in history came from paying attention, not from marketing. Number 3 is chickpea and olive salad. And this one may be the clearest example of how the ancient world built health through consistency rather than novelty. Chickpeas do not arrive in Scripture with dramatic symbolism or miraculous moments. They are simply there, over and over again, eaten across the ancient Near East for thousands of years. That alone tells you something. Foods do not survive across 10 millennia unless they keep proving their value in real life. Chickpeas have a very low glycemic response for a carbohydrate-rich food, which means they help provide energy without causing the sharp blood sugar swings that leave people tired and hungry again soon after eating. They also contain resistant starch and fiber that feed beneficial gut bacteria, reduce inflammation, and support better insulin sensitivity and cholesterol balance over time. Dress those chickpeas with cold-pressed olive oil, and the whole dish starts doing even more. Olive oil contributes healthy monounsaturated fats, along with anti-inflammatory compounds that support the heart and blood vessels. Add herbs like mint, hyssop, or coriander, and you are layering in digestive and antibacterial benefits without even thinking of it as a health strategy. That is exactly the point. Ancient populations were not built on one miracle ingredient. They were built on repetition. Chickpeas eaten week after week, year after year. Olive oil poured over meals every day. Herbs used constantly, because that was simply how food was prepared. Modern research keeps confirming that legumes are one of the dietary habits most consistently associated with longevity and healthy aging across different cultures. Not a trendy protocol, not an expensive supplement, just beans eaten faithfully over time. And that may be one of the biggest lessons hidden in these biblical meals. Their power did not come from rarity. It came from consistency. Number 2 is barley bread with olive oil, the daily bread that was doing far more than most people realize. Today, bread is often treated as filler, a side item, or something people are told to avoid. But in the ancient world, bread was the foundation of life, and the type of bread people ate mattered enormously. In the Gospel of John, when Jesus feeds the 5,000, the loaves are barley loaves, not wheat. That detail matters because barley was the grain of workers, farmers, soldiers, and ordinary families across the ancient world. It was eaten constantly, and that repetition turns out to be part of the reason it was so powerful. Barley contains an exceptional concentration of beta-glucan fiber, a compound so well studied for cholesterol lowering and blood sugar stabilization that even modern manufacturers are allowed to make heart health claims about it under certain conditions. Inside the digestive tract, beta-glucan forms a kind of slow-moving gel that feeds beneficial gut bacteria, slows glucose absorption, and helps pull LDL cholesterol out of circulation. But what made this everyday bread even more remarkable was how it was prepared and eaten. Whole grain barley bread, stone ground, and dense, was often made with olive oil worked into it or poured over it generously. And once olive oil enters the picture, the meal shifts again. Extra virgin olive oil contains compounds associated with anti-inflammatory activity that researchers have compared to some of the same pathways targeted by common pain-relieving drugs. So now, this is no longer just bread. It is a daily combination supporting the cardiovascular system, stabilizing blood sugar, feeding the gut, and lowering chronic inflammation over time. It was dark, dense, ordinary bread, eaten by fishermen and laborers. But in terms of long-term metabolic and heart health, it may have been one of the most functional staple foods in the world. And that brings us right to the final meal. Because once you see what barley bread and olive oil were doing every day, the larger pattern becomes impossible to miss. These people were not stumbling into health by accident. They were building it meal by meal, often with foods so simple that modern people overlook them precisely because they are not exotic. But the final entry ties everything together in a way that changes how you read the entire list. Number 1 is the 7 Sacred Foods Feast Bowl, and this is the meal that changes how you read everything else on the list. In Deuteronomy 8:8, God describes the Promised Land with striking precision, naming 7 specific foods: wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. For centuries, that verse has been read as a picture of agricultural abundance. And that reading is absolutely right. But when you step back and look at those 7 foods together through a nutritional lens, something else becomes almost impossible to ignore. They form one of the most complete and balanced food combinations you could build from a single biblical passage. And the deeper you look, the harder it becomes to treat that as coincidence. Start with the grains, wheat and barley. Together, they provide steady, slow-burning energy, B vitamins, fiber, and complementary proteins that help sustain physical and mental performance without the instability that comes from overly refined carbohydrates. Then add grapes, which bring fiber, hydration, and a powerful range of natural compounds that support repair processes throughout the body and help protect the cardiovascular system. Figs step in with minerals that fill crucial nutritional gaps, especially magnesium, potassium, and calcium, along with fiber that supports digestion and feeds beneficial gut bacteria. Pomegranates raise the nutritional density even further, delivering one of the richest antioxidant profiles found in any fruit, plus compounds that the digestive system can convert into potent anti-inflammatory substances. Then come olives. And this is where the whole bowl starts to act less like a collection of good ingredients and more like a coordinated system. Olives provide vitamin E, antioxidant compounds, and healthy monounsaturated fats. But just as importantly, those fats help the body absorb fat-soluble nutrients from everything else in the meal more efficiently. In other words, olives do not only contribute their own benefits, they help unlock the benefits of the surrounding foods. Dates then finish the structure by bringing quick, natural energy, potassium, fiber, and antimicrobial tannins, offering a rapid source of fuel that still comes packaged with nutritional value instead of empty sugar. When researchers analyze these foods together rather than one by one, what stands out is how well they cover for one another. The grains provide what the fruits lack. The fruits provide what the grains are missing. And the olives increase the usefulness of the whole system. It is not just that each item is nutritious. It is that together they form a pattern of support that feels unusually complete. If you were to build this feast bowl in a modern kitchen, you could start with a base of whole barley and ancient wheat, then add fresh grapes, sliced figs, pomegranate seeds, a handful of whole olives, and several dates on the side, finishing everything with a generous pour of high-quality extra virgin olive oil. What you end up with is not a gimmick meal or a symbolic tribute to an old text. You end up with something genuinely practical, deeply satisfying, and remarkably aligned with what modern nutrition keeps rediscovering. It supports the heart, the gut, stable energy, immune resilience, mineral balance, and the body's ongoing ability to regulate inflammation. The people of the ancient world did not need clinical trials to tell them this meal worked. They were paying close attention to the body, to the land, and to the outcomes they observed over generations. And once you see that, the entire list starts to come into focus. The cucumber mint yogurt bowl was not just refreshing, it helped cool the body, calm the gut, and restore digestion. The garlic and herb lentil soup was not just comforting, it was layered with immune and metabolic support. The pomegranate and barley bowl was doing quiet work for the heart and the arteries. Dates with nuts delivered sustained portable energy. Grapes with goat cheese and herbs supported the gut and immune system in ways people are still studying now. Roasted lamb with dates and herbs rebuilt strength when the body was depleted. Figs and almonds created one of the most nutritionally dense pairings imaginable from just 2 ingredients. Chickpeas and olive oil showed how consistency can matter more than novelty. Barley bread with olive oil may have been one of the most effective daily staples for long-term metabolic health ever practiced. And now this final bowl takes all of those same themes and gathers them into one passage, one meal, one pattern. That is what makes these biblical meals so compelling. They challenge the modern assumption that ancient people were nutritionally primitive, guessing their way through survival. In many cases, they were extraordinarily observant. They may not have known the language of antioxidants, polyphenols, beta-glucans, probiotics, glycemic response, or anti-inflammatory pathways, but they knew when a food strengthened the body, when it restored energy, when it improved resilience, and when it consistently helped people live and work better. Over time, that kind of close observation becomes its own form of intelligence. And once those observations are repeated across centuries, preserved in habits, rituals, and sacred texts, they become very difficult to dismiss. It also forces a bigger question. What exactly happened in the modern world that made so many people drift so far from this way of eating somewhere along the line? Food stopped being judged primarily by how well it sustained life and started being judged by convenience, shelf life, hyperpalatability, and branding. The result is that many people now live surrounded by calories but starved of nourishment. They eat constantly, yet still feel tired, inflamed, and underfed at a deeper level. And that is why lists like this resonate so strongly. They remind us that the answer is often not hidden in something futuristic or complicated. Sometimes it is found by going back to foods that have already been tested, not in laboratories first, but in real human lives over thousands of years. That does not mean every product in a modern supermarket labeled olive oil, barley bread, honey, or ancient grain is equal to what people once ate. The difference between real food and imitation still matters. High-quality olive oil is not the same as a diluted industrial blend. Whole grains are not the same as heavily processed flour products. Fermented dairy is not the same as sweetened imitation yogurt. Even something as simple as dates or figs can be transformed into a very different food once stripped, processed, preserved, or loaded with additives. So part of recovering the strength of these meals is not only choosing the right ingredients in name, but choosing forms that still resemble the original logic behind them. And maybe that is the real takeaway from all of this. These meals were not magical. They were meaningful because they were built from careful attention, repeated practice, and a respect for the connection between food and human flourishing. They were simple enough to eat regularly, nourishing enough to matter, and balanced enough to support people through hard climates, hard labor, sickness, recovery, and ordinary daily life in a world full of nutrition confusion. That kind of simplicity is refreshing. It reminds you that the body often responds best not to extremes, but to rhythm, consistency, and foods that come with their structure intact. So if there is one practical thing to do after hearing this list, it is not trying to overhaul everything overnight. It is choosing one of these meals and making it this week. Try the lentil soup, build the grain bowl, put together the grapes, goat cheese, and herbs, bake the barley bread, make the 7 sacred foods bowl, and see how it feels to eat something that carries both history and real nourishment at the same time. Because the deeper truth behind all 10 meals is the same. The ancient world was not just eating to survive. In many ways, it had already discovered that the best food does more than keep you alive. It strengthens you, steadies you, and teaches you what lasting nourishment actually feels like. If you got something out of this, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who would love this kind of content. And in the comments, let me know which one of these biblical meals you would actually try first. Because honestly, that is where this gets